Hello, everybody. Let's see if this is live. Is this live? Now, hello, everyone. How are we all doing? I know you're having a nice time. I know you're having fun. I've currently forgotten my mouse, so just give me a half a second while I grab the mouse from the other room. I have a mouse. Training assistant, floppy research assistant, are you holding the fort? Are you holding the fort? Training assistant, floppy research assistant. Let's see. Hello. Yes, up here. Apparently, my spot has been taken by the trainee floppy research assistant. I don't know. These canines are taking over historians' posts everywhere. Soon you'll find every university, all the history departments, full of cute floppy dogs teaching. Yes, and before any of you ask, he's being held up by my sister.
It's the same toaster. Yes.
It is the same toaster. I'm back in this place. You off the iron brew now?
No, thank you.
You not only want my seat and my job, you want my iron brew.
No, thank you.
I will allow you to take two of those things. I will not allow you to take the third. Hello, everyone. How are we doing? Cute. Right. Ooh. There we go. Right then, let's go see the chat. Sorry about that. I had left this elsewhere. It is the same toaster. This is not my own kitchen. This is the kitchen for where we're staying. Well, we were staying here last Sunday. We're staying here this weekend as well. If anyone wants to know what's expensive in life, try taking your family on holiday or going on holiday with your family to Cornwall for any kind of family event. We went to what was it today? Port Isaac. Okay, for those of you who don't know Port Isaac, if you know Doc Martin, it's where that's filmed. It was also where Fisherman's Friends, the movie about the fisherman who sang sea shanties, was filmed. And I can also tell you that buying family members small trinkets and ice creams and things there can be very expensive. Witness today, I have spent more money than someone who has got Scottish and Cornish blood in him will ever feel comfortable spending in a single day. In fact, I'm suffering mild trauma from it. Hello, Carl McGasberg. Hello, Michael Cooch. Hello, Peter Dawson. My gosh, enjoyed my listed cruiser series. Two related questions come up. One, naval combat in 1890 era. Never mind theoretical range. What was the realistic battle range of the guns given fire control like there all the time? What ranges did they expect to fight at? Let's put it this way. You're probably talking 6,000 to 8,000 yards is probably the maximum they're talking about. And a pragmatic range could well be as close as 4,000. Which also doesn't impact exactly what you think in terms of your armor you're going to put on your ship, because really, what chance is there of your armor resisting anything at that range? Hello, Tanya Velikan. Hello, John Shea. Hello, Paul from Chicago. Hello, Steve McDevitt. And Calvin Gasberg. Hi, Steve Richards. Hi, Santa Canera. Hello, Malaga. Hello, Grace Sotasuki. Hello, Alex Hunt. Hello, Anna Paul. Hello, Amelia. Let's see. Hello, Paul Westwick. Hello, Melanie. Hello. Do. That's super funny. A friend of mine called it about 45 minutes before the announcement because BBC were already wearing black ties already. Yeah, they do start to have panic quite quickly. I have to admit, on the subject of Queen, as I think I've said already to some of you in conversations on this subject, in my experience, couples who have a very strong relationship, if they've been together to the end, when one goes, you tend to have the other one only around for roughly 18 months to 2 years. And that seems to be what happened here, in my mind. Hi, Colin Cameron. Hello, Bugger8229. Hello, Paul. What is this hair? Mm-hmm. Oh, dear, Brooke. Zebedee, I'm very sorry about the fluffy cousins. Yeah, Zebedee was hoping this meant he got more fluffy cousins. Raleigh was kind of hoping it didn't. Raleigh was worried he was going to have a lot of corgis telling him what to do because the trouble is, at certain, we've only just trained Zebedee out the idea that Raleigh is not a sheep to be herded. He might have a woolen coat, but the fluffy research assistant is not something that needs to be herded around. Really, he doesn't. There are times when probably he should be, but he doesn't. Yeah, Hannah, I'll let Queen lies at rest in Hollywood. Tomorrow you should see the Honors of Scotland. It's been a long time since they played a part in a funeral. It hopefully will be very, very well done. I'm hoping so. There is one which is slightly worried with the current Scottish leadership that they might choose to try and make political points out of it. But I'm hoping they don't. I'm hoping they play to the full traditions of Scotland and what it can do at its best. Naga, so since the dream has been hijacked, what is the corgi perspective of the current state of the Royal Navy? They don't have enough corgis. Seriously, Zebedee thinks they should have corgis for every ship. Just imagine the boarding actions. It'd be a case of, right then, we're ready for the Royal Marines. What are those small things coming over on jetpacks, though, that look like rather large potatoes? Oh, good God, it's the flying corgis! You thought the Gurkhas were bad and scary. Wait until you see the flying corgis arrive. Karen, I was at East Frodthun yesterday and was surprised the Fritzek was about the same size as the 700-pound World War One RAF bomb. Was that the actual size of the one that hit the Warspite? I think the one that hit the Warspite might have been a tad bigger, but not that much bigger than that one. No, sorry, max realistic was 7 to 8,000 yards. What's the maximum range of the guns? More than that. It's always a scary thing when your guns outrange your sensors, because it means you either have to do a lot of work on your sensors, or you are now in a race against your opponent over who spots who first. Because if your guns outrange your sensors, their guns probably do as well. Hell, Dr. Clarke, why didn't the Admiralty consider redesigning the Admirals with an all or nothing production rather than throw away the design completely and restart the G3 N3 studies? They'd already built too much of them. They're already too far along. You either completed them as you had them and they mucked around several times, or you threw them away. Or the other option is to convert them to an aircraft carriers, which is what I would have done. With deck edge lifts. Nice deck edge lifts. And a nice 2 inch, 2 to 3 inch armor deck. Nice show, Max. Nice Stafford. Amazing Barra. I had an idea for the Yamato of doing one with 2 secondary turrets on each side, kind of in the corners. Interesting idea. Sure. Update on the Spanish succession game of Ireland. Our diplomats have mapped up so badly the French and the Austrians allied and are now angling to restore James to the throne. Life happens. Alexander, human related, are you doing fight camp next year? I might go with Drac. I might. I need to get myself sorted out and actually get to some lessons because I'm good at saber work, but I haven't done much HEMA work, honestly. So we got questions. I'm seeing the Sandan class are about ready for use in Ukrainian service. Given that they already have what I assume is fairly high risk sonar, what luck might they have versus subs? Well, their sonar is of course focused on minesweeping, which means they're not the best for oceanic anti-submarine warfare. However, in littorals and shallow water, they can be particularly menacing. So we will see. Graham, they won't dare mess this up. One protester today got a rather nasty shock. We can hope so. I would prefer it to be a credit rather than a bait. Whoosh. Is one corgi equal to one emu? Let's put it this way. In a fight between the two, I have a feeling it would be a very interesting stalemate, where the emu could certainly outpace the corgi, but the emu could not outturn or dig the corgi, and in fighting terms, they would probably come off about equal. So it would be a case of you can outrun, but you can't outfight. Seneca Nera, I don't think Charles III will resign. I think he will do like his mum did and die on the throne. How long he's on the throne for is a different matter because he's always looked a little less well and fit and healthy than her to me. But I wish him. Let God save the king now. So I wish him all the best. I hope he does really well because if he does really well, Britain will do well. It's not the same as with a prime minister these days, but it still has a big impact. The British monarch does have a big impact on our foreign policy and on our presentation of ourselves to the world. It can be scary how much of an impact they do have. And it's worthwhile having. It's a USP. And I'm always very loath to throw away USPs. I'm hoping we can get Prof. Lambert as a guest on Beltrons. Him and Michael Clapp are most requested returners, and so I'll be talking to them about the coming back. Well, I'm in the kitchen. Well, the place I'm staying. Let me explain. And it's far easier to show you than really to explain. So, camera moving. Ba, 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 ba. There you go. There's the internet. There is the only cable in the house. There is the internet. This is the blue cable I brought with me as a backup just in case. So, as I brought that cable with me as a backup just in case, that limits where I can be. So I'm in the kitchen. There is no insulting the sovereign law in the UK. Sadly. But no. It's for the best because in either way, the moment you have any law like that, people can start abusing it. But okay, was the Lion class going to use the same type of turrets and guns Nelson class? And if not, was there any designs debate on using the same type to save time? No, they had new, better 16-inch guns. They were also going to be able to retro upgrade it into the Nelson class, so they could have their guns upgraded. And they were going to have new turrets, but based on that turret design, but actually going back to the original turret design of the Nelson turret, the original one pre them trying to lighten it and actually making it heavier. Andrew Paul, when building the Brandenburg class in the 1880s, why did the Germans not go for 6 11-inch 40 barrels instead of going with 4 11-inch 40 and 2 11-inch 35 guns? They've known the differences in ballistics. Displacement, cost, and someone had a bright idea. Remember correctly, someone had a bright idea. Doc C, what would you build instead of Yamatos for the IJN? Well, the thing is, I've often said, if I'm not building Yamatos for the IJN, then I want to build more units. If I'm building the Yamatos, then I want them to be known about around the world, so they have their big image effect. Remember, as I often point out with capital ships, the point about a capital ship is it is a status unit. And a status unit can only have status if people know about it. So there's no point having a secret battleship. Having secret flotillas of submarines and destroyers, that makes sense in World War II. Not that I'm sure that anyone had secret flotillas of destroyers or submarines. And I'm sure no navy had a whole load of destroyers which were technically classified as being ready for the scrap, which are then modified very quickly upon war starting to break out in sort of starting the process in 1938 using plans drawn up in 1937 and are in service fighting the war by 1939. No navy had done that. But yeah, having secret capital ships is kind of oxymoronic. Because the whole point about a capital ship is it is a capital ship. It is a status unit. You want people to know about it. But if I wasn't building Yamatos and I was Japan, I'd probably be thinking, okay, in the distances of the Pacific, I want something big, but fast and long ranged. So I'd probably be going with a treble 16-inch gun design. And I'd be trying to I'd almost probably be looking at the Nelsons and the Dunkirks and going, can I build something super efficient that can make the best use of my infrastructure and give me firepower? Garland, what warship we name for the Queen and new King? I doubt we'll see a new warship named for Queen Elizabeth II for a while. We've got Queen Elizabeth I already named for in terms of the aircraft carrier in service. And the rule is we don't tend to name for a ship for a monarch until after they've finished being our monarchs, after they've died. So don't expect to see a Charles III vessel sailing around for a while. As a rule, King Charles has not exactly been a name the Royal Navy has gone with. Mainly because of various interesting events with both of them. So it'll be interesting to see. Hello, Wayne. I was wondering, next class iron battleship should be named after the Queen's corgis. to have enough ships to name after all the Queen's corgis, it would have to be a class of frigate. But guys, how much actual power does the King or Queen of UK have? That's kind of like asking how many divisions does the Pope have? In theory, the monarch, reigns and the Prime Minister rules in Britain. But the fact is, the monarch has a lot of informal power in that they can highlight causes. If the monarch gets involved, that gives a lot of publicity to something, and almost always automatically forces the government to do something about that scenario. So, if the monarch supports something, their mere presence turning up and looking at it gets newspaper focuses, which gets column inches, which gets the government to have to respond. So it's kind of one of those scenarios where it's a constitutional monarchy. We have a head of state who is a monarch, who provides us with stability and provides also the Prime Minister. One of the other things which often is forgotten is the Prime Minister has a weekly audience with the monarch where they can discuss what's going on in the world with the monarch. And they are required to do this. Almost every Prime Minister who's ever spoken about them has said the same thing. It's amazingly useful to have one person you can go and have a conversation with. And it's completely discreet. Nothing that's said in it will ever get out. Nothing will ever be discussed with other people. So you can have someone else to share your problems with completely without any issues, without it being problematic. I was wondering why you were scuffing your feet. You break the heels.
I know.
And I'm sounding like my grandfather, but you break the heels.
I haven't got. I don't know. These sandals actually. I haven't got them.
They have got heels, I know, because I can see your foot on them. Sorry. Torturing a sister. It's what brothers do.
I'm trying to be in two places at once.
I've told you before, cloning is the answer. At least 4. But no, those meetings with the Prime Minister, for the Prime Minister and the Queen, are so useful. It's a very different scenario. One of the things that interesting conversations I've heard about, and it could be entirely apocryphal, but it was, I think it was one of the presidents. I think it was one of the presidents at the time talking to Tony Blair, and he was saying everything rests on me. I have no one to talk to. Basically, I can talk to my staff, but they're all looking to me to make decisions. Da 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 da. And Tony Blair basically was going back, well, I can go have a chat with the Queen, and I weekly have a chat with the Queen, who can be my sounding board, who I can explain problems to and discuss things with, and doesn't necessarily give me advice or tell me what doesn't necessarily give me advice, and certainly doesn't tell me what to do, but is there as someone for me to basically bounce ideas off, and that's useful. I think of it in terms of a ship's captain, and the ship of state is far more complicated than a warship, but the principle remains. Just think how many ship's captains would love to have had someone they could talk to on a weekly basis who will keep it completely discreetly, has tons of experience, and will just act as a sounding board for you. It'll just be heaven for them. How did the first ironclad and the iron armored warships of the line compare to each other? What issues did the refitted line ships have? The refitted line ships were heavy, difficult to maneuver. They often suffered various forms of wear and rapid rusting, and very difficult to maintain. Ironclads tended to be slightly better, but not much better. Basically, all of the original ironclads and the iron armored ships that are sort of at the same time are all a period of transition. They're all universally terrible. So I don't understand why nor is it known about Type 83 as the carriers underperforming as well. The carriers aren't really underperforming. The carriers are doing fine. You're just running into the problems of having only two carriers. This is the trouble. Everyone said from the beginning this was going to be a problem of having two carriers, but no. Lots of people were quoting me going, no, 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 that we've worked out the stats. BAE have drawn up all these details. The Ministry of Defence are certain that two carriers are going to be fine because this is the theory and the projections of the maths. And the likelihood of this event happening and this happening is one in this and one in that. And I'm sitting there listening to it going, yeah, and Sod's law is those one in happen. And those one in have happened. And this is why you need more than two. I'm sorry. I have said this many times. One is a white elephant, it's equal to none. Two is a capability when it's available. Three is an availability. Four is a guaranteed capability. Okay, there's a reason the strategic deterrent has four boats. There is a reason we have four boats for the strategic deterrent. It's not because we like spending money. It's because to guarantee one at sea on patrol 365 days of the year, no matter what happens, you have to have four. And so here is the thing. If you wanted to guarantee the UK had a carrier battle group ready to go, you would need to have 4 carriers, 12 destroyers, probably 16 frigates, and 4 support ship groups. And that would all have to be assigned to the carrier battle groups, and probably 4 SSNs as well. All assigned for that tasking to guarantee a carrier battle group availability at sea. To guarantee an availability, take that number, divide it all by 4, at times by 3. But what do we have? We have 2 carriers. We have 6 destroyers. You're starting to see the problem here. So yeah, things happen. You are talking about a very complicated, very advanced piece of machinery which has a lot of components which are being sourced by the lowest bidder. I can't think what things could go wrong in them. We don't things under the name ships after the current monarch. We always name them after the former monarch. Since King George the Sixth. I did actually think at one point Charles was going to be George the Seventh, but no, he's decided he's going to be Charlie Boy the Third, apparently. Mm. At least we don't know really until he's coronated what his coronation name's going to be. But also, could you imagine the impact of having a cult fleet to the tribals tucked away in Canada prior to World War II? It would be very, very nice, thank you. The Royal Navy would be very happy with that. Me and Drac mine and Drac's paper, when it eventually gets published, which is going to be soon, has them a little bit bigger. Not a massive lot of hard power, but a massive soft power to put into geopolitical terms. Yep. Do you have a common new cruisers as Japan as much as this? They seem almost battleship size. That's going to be in Bilge Pumps, which is probably going to come out tomorrow. I've had to do a lot more editing to it than normally because we had the internet connection keep going down, so it's taken longer. Especially as, well, I've been away for my mum's birthday, so sorry, that came first. One is something I do voluntarily for fun and because you all enjoy it. The other is something which, if I didn't do right, I would no longer be here to do anything for you. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think back in June, you did technology and introduction to a history of sorts, playing a video game. Are there any plans to continue the series? There are plans, but I'm still working on what a good video game for it would be. Um, yeah, Gareth from our trip to Canada has got an idea, and yeah, so working through that. Sim Richards, would you have built the I-400? What's your view on them? Yeah, I'd have built the I-400. Frankly, if I was the Japanese, I'd have built every submarine I could get my hands on, especially long-range ones. The other thing you might want to point out is our armed forces squarely just a monarch. Tell our folks why. Basically, it's a counterbalance to the power of the prime minister, as it's being constitutionally accepted currently. The idea is that the Prime Minister, of course, in the UK has the fact that they're automatically the leader of the largest party in the House of Commons. And whilst Britain's historical backbenchers are sufficiently self possessed that turning that into a dictatorship would be very interesting to watch happen and would really, no matter what people might portray occasionally in the press, etc., trying to get the any major political party in the UK to all go in one direction enough to turn a majority into something akin to a dictatorship to do the sort of things you need to do to be a dictatorship would be incredibly interesting and incredibly unlikely to happen. There is a reason why most of the, in fact, all the things that went through, broadly speaking, for COVID, etc., had time limits on them. Was because the only way they could get them through was if they had the time limits on them then they need to be reenacted by Parliament. And that was also another reason why some of them weren't repealed, because they just thought, well, why devote parliamentary time to repealing this when it's going to be out of decommission in 2 months anyway, and we can just use it while we're finishing off the things anyway. But no, so the thing is, the armed forces swear loyalty to the monarch, not to the prime minister, because the monarch is head of state and therefore represents the nation. And also, it means if the prime minister does try to do dictatorial and it gets problematic, then technically the monarch can order there to be another election to check that the British public agree with what's going to happen. And the thing is, if anyone tries to stop her ordering that election or him ordering that election, then the very nice people who actually have all the guns belong to them. But the fact is, because those people who have all the guns are also paid and kept in existence by acts of parliament, there is a balance of those two. Because if you're worried about the monarch doing that when it's not supposed to, then parliament can actually disband those things. So it's a case of both sides have a method of controlling the other. It's a balance. It's a fudge. It's a British constitution. Wait, what? I pity your sister. Oh, please don't. She gets her own revenge very well much. Often. She gets her own revenge. But again, is that why your carriers were named Queen Elizabeth and Prince of Wales? To an extent, that it was their turn. Given the number of sister interruptions we've seen in videos, is 4 clones really such a good idea, Michael Coach? Could be interesting for me to deal with. But I could also have a lot of fun with that. Who would you choose as World War II British Admirals be to replace the Dorman at Java Sea if you could have replaced him? See, the thing is, there's not much more you can do than Dorman tried to do at the Java Sea, but if you had Vian or someone out there like that, actually, no. You need a cruiser specialist who's used to doing this cruiser stuff. Harwood. If I was going to pick anyone, it would be Harwood, because if anyone can pull a cruiser rabbit out of the hat, it's probably him. For all, as I've said before, he is not good at playing the Commander in Chief politics game because that wasn't what he was trained for. He was being trained up for the South American, South Atlantic stations, maybe Second Sea Lord. If he did really well, that was where he was going. Not the political side, not the first Sea Lord post, not third Sea Lord, not dealing with any of the Mediterranean or any of those sort of things. And when he's put in Levant, he's out of his depth because that's not what he's been trained for, and that's not what he's really suited for. And the Royal Navy, this is something which sometimes people find it strange for. It's like you don't have ships, which you don't have. Not all your ships are going to necessarily be first rate. Not all of your officers and even your senior officers are being recruited for the same senior roles. Some of your officers you're recruiting because you only have so many people who will be good enough to get to a certain rank and actually deal with the issues at certain rank. And some of them will be better at dealing with certain areas of those issues than others. And that's fine if you need enough of those officers, because if you need enough of them, you're going to have enough breadth of taskings that you can still make use of those people, so you promote them. And that's Harwood for you. Jones, having 3 units in a class and one at sea in time is still wartime training forces. Yes, it is. Basically, peacetime is usually a rule of 5. Who was the last Prince of Wales who didn't become king later on? Ooh. There were some in the run of the Georges. There are some interesting ones in the runs of the Georges. Most famous, of course, there was Arthur, Henry's older brother. This is what I said. The treaty said to replace cavalry ships when they got 30 years in including life. Did the RN have plans to replace Rana Pulse? And what was the replacement design? Vanguard. I'm fairly certain that's what Vanguard, etc., are being produced for. Vanguard, basically the light, fast battleships were being produced to replace things like the battle cruisers. Maybe later on. Why did the Royal Navy stand in the stood down in the Indian Ocean, East Africa coast after Ceylon raid, Japanese and Brunei? In between 9 foot. The Royal Navy didn't stand down in the Indian Ocean. They didn't. The Royal Navy, after the Ceylon raid, had to rebuild. They had to go and support various other operations in Madagascar, etc. You only have so many ships available, so you do move ships around. But no, the Indian Ocean Fleet and the fleet in the ocean stays there and does lots of duties in between 1942 and 1945 and takes part in a lot of operations. There's a lot going on there. They do have needs for ships elsewhere, warspite, etc. Carriers have to move around, but the thing is, you're dealing with a navy which has a lot of global commitments, and it's supposed to take the lead in the European waters, in the Mediterranean waters, and the Americans are taking the lead in the Pacific, and the Indian Ocean is sort of this third option in the middle. So it doesn't necessarily. It's more a case of the Indian Ocean doesn't get the attention to what operations were going on, than there's nothing actually going on. Should I assume that the Type 83 grows a bit every week? A little bit. Greg Frederick, son of George I, died before he could become king, but all the time since Edward, son of Edward I, have been the heir. Doc, yes, but he claimed as Charles III has referred to himself as such as the Eccentric Council. I know, but it wouldn't be the first time a monarch has proclaimed themselves under one name at the Eccentric Council and then been coronated under another name. We are Britain. We have some wonderful and glorious history. I'm a historian. That's the curse of me. I know these things. Honourable, what are the chances we get to see a coronation no review for King Charles's coronation, perhaps in June next year? Doubtful, and the coronation is not going to wait till June next year. The coronation will have to be on a saint day, and by tradition, it's the first saint's day after the funeral of the previous monarch. No, that was the thing established by after Victoria's reign. It'll be interesting to see when it happens and what exactly how it takes place, and also who shows up. Remember, who shows up to the funeral is going to be one big test of international relations. Who shows up to the coronation is going to be another. Chance of a coronation over review, though, I'd say low. If you think organising heads of state to go and visit these things is tough, organising ships to be free is even tougher. Well, also, how about this right here? Instead of naming the Dreadnought Submarine Warspite, change the name to Queen Elizabeth II. Say the name Warspite for the next pair of carriers alongside Ark Royal. Nah. Queen Elizabeth II would never want to be named after a boomer. She was all about being able to do the soft power diplomacy. A boomer can't do that. Connie, what's the 100-year-old floating dry dock the Soviet Russians have this limiting factor on the size of Kuznetsov? It was one of them, but not all of them. Okay, with the 21st anniversary of 9/11, did the UK and Europe go on high alert, or was that just the US right after the attacks happened that day? I think the rest of Europe was on a level of alert, but I don't think it was necessarily high alert. Hello, I was asking. Amanda Zero, doesn't the monarch have immense fortune? Well, this is one of those interesting things. Now, technically, the monarch has this thing called the Duchy of Lancaster, which is set up to support the monarchy. What the monarch does is anything that's they run the Duchy of Lancaster, but they turn over the profits, well, all of them, to the government. In return, the monarchy gets given the sovereign grant, which allows them to run the functions of monarchy. Broadly speaking, that's how it works. It gets interesting because then you have people turn around and go, oh, they're getting the taxpayers' money. And you're going, well, actually, no, they're turning over more each year in sovereign grants than they are. They're turning over more each year in money from the Duchy of Lancaster than they're getting in sovereign grant. And then usually people go, well, that's the public's money anyway. And you go, oh, well, yes, but now you're not making the case of you're upset with them getting taxpayers' money. You're basically upset with them getting any money at all, which suggests you're of the Republican persuasion and you're trying to hide behind fake arguments. Just say what you want to say. Some of us like having a monarchy because mainly we don't have to have some form. Well, no. This is the main big problem for the UK. If we get rid of the monarchy, let's say we replace it with a presidential system. Well, then you're going to have an elected president and an elected prime minister. The trouble is the president might get elected by the public and have a lot of public support, but they won't have the control of parliament because that's what the prime minister has. Because the prime minister is by de facto the leader of the largest party in parliament. So then you have a scenario where you could very much have constantly political gridlock, especially if you give the president any political power. And who's going to want to run elections for a thing which is just a ceremonial post? Admittedly, some people might like to just have that popularity contest, but those are probably not going to be people you want representing your country on the international stage as your head of state. So, yeah, welcome to a really modern conundrum that is probably the reason why things won't change, despite a very small and very loud, active, and I would say quite creative minority agitating for it. Because they're very good at the first 10 words, they're not very good at the words which come after that. Saving Richards, if you build a Japanese subs, do you change the doctrine more aggressive? Okay, so let's start off with this. The common thing you hear about Japanese submarines is they weren't aggressive enough. Okay, why? They didn't go after trade. What trade were they supposed to be going after? This is the question. What trade were the Japanese supposed to be going after? Because are you talking about the huge amount of trade going between America and South America down the Pacific coast? Because that's a long way from Japan. That's going to require a lot of support to get it across there. And honestly, they'd be better off trying to take the Pitcairn Islands first, and probably would take them before anyone noticed them. They'd taken them, and then using that as a base. And trying to sustain that. But either way, that's going to be a lot of logistical effort. Okay, what about the trade going between America and Australia? Well, that's fun to go after because that often quite goes the southern route, which means it goes down and along rather than going right across. In which case, it's still a long way away. There is not. They're compared to the Germans and the attack on the Atlantic, where there's a huge flow of trade running across to the UK. But the Germans are operating from France. They're operating from all these bases which aren't that far away from the UK where the trade is going to. And the trade cannot really divert around them. So they can do that. But for the Japanese, that isn't really an option because America's biggest trading partner in the Pacific is Japan. So if they're fighting a war, there's going to be no huge amount of trade going across the Pacific that the Japanese can interdict and destroy. That's their problem. Raparosa, hello, Brad Vinette. Hello. Raparosa, which should I fear more when it comes to hideous aircraft, the Blackburn, or the Avro Bison? Blackburn. The Bison didn't fly that well. How would you employ the A400 class? Probably would have tried to do some stuff off the coast of Australia because that would have been possible. But yeah, then I'd have had to make sure I had bases to support them. So it would have been a two-stage thing. It wouldn't just be having the class. I'd have to do the things to get me there. Hi, Jack Ray. Dr. 95. Women's campaign did a Mandan Arctic Warfare category get the credit they do? They do if you read Julian Thompson's book. Other books, especially some of the books written by other branches of the forces, tend to overlook them in favor of more sneaky beaky units. Alright, Dr. Clarke, I know Iron Subs had fun in the Med. What about Pacific? They had fun in the ocean as well. In the Pacific, they had fun when they got there, but they've been withdrawn from there, and by the time they get back, the Americans have done most of the good hunting. They didn't leave them anything, it was just terrible. Medal 81, hello. Who was the best Royal Navy Admiral of World War II? Andrew Cunningham, Bertram Ramsay, Max Houghton, James Somerville, or any other others miss? Probably Cunningham. Followed by Somerville. I'm not always the biggest fan of Houghton. Ramsay's fairly decent. I'm thinking he definitely ranks in up there, probably between next to Somerville. Vian's pretty good. I have time for a fair number of the others as well. Trouble is, the RN loses a whole crop of its senior officers just before war begins. They all die of various diseases. Most wasn't there a large gap between her father's death and Elizabeth's coronation? Not that large a gap, really. Often, if you watch some of the movies and programs about it, it seems like a large gap because so much gets done in between. So anyway, have you read the Moscow's maintenance report from 2 weeks before it sank? Not yet, no. It's on my list of things to read when I get home, but honestly. So, Zaka 18, isn't that the Crown Estates and not the Duchy? The Duchy are the Crown Estates. The Crown Estates are the Duchy of Lancaster. It gets fun because people like to refer them as different names to try and confuse the issue sometimes. But the Crown Estates can also refer to the Duchy of Lancaster and the Duchy of Cornwall, which is what supports the Prince of Wales. Why do you have to reorganise and spring clean the entire house and make a load of noise whenever I do a live?
Because Mum insisted that he didn't.
No.
I didn't mean to knock it over.
You did.
Hold off because I knocked over on it.
I love you dearly, but you are never going to be quiet.
It fell over. Yes, I got told off.
And if you consider that telling off, we have to have a conversation at some point. That was a sarcastic comment. You're British, know the difference. Love you too, sis. Oh. In my defense, I have paid for all the parking today, so you know. Sam McDevitt, I apologise in advance for yes. I saw current. I mean, it's not good at turning up for official stuff like coronations. I'm fairly certain Biden's already said he's going to be there for the funeral, and I wouldn't be surprised actually at the moment. The interesting thing is I have this feeling that Xi Jinping, President Xi, might actually turn up to the funeral as well. I have this. I don't know what it is, but there is part of me that just thinks he will turn up for this because the Queen Elizabeth dying is one of those figures who's it's kind of like Nelson Mandela in very different ways. Please note, I'm not saying they're the same or have the same stories, but there are personalities who, for whatever reason, become touchstones of an era. And when they die, everyone turns up to their funerals. And Mandela was a touchstone for all the apartheid. The Queen was a touchstone because of all she lived through and because of all she was there through as the sort of constant and presence in everyone in the background of everyone's lives. It's a different thing, but she was there for that, all that. And I can imagine quite a few people are going to turn up to her funeral. I would be very surprised if the vast majority of European and both elected and monarch heads of states and most of the Commonwealth ones do not turn up at the bare minimum, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot more as well do as well. The Queen's 2 will be the Super DD class UK builds after they perfect a naval ray gun. Probably. At this rate. Carl Re-Monarch versus public money. Yeah, but then the monarch performs public diplomatic president duties. Also gives a baseline stable family a few centuries, and they tend to amass enough wealth and property. Yep. First 10 words. It's a debating phrase. 10 words. So let's put it this way. If I was a Republican candidate and I said the words, because the American people know how to spend their money better than the government does, that's a great line. Sounds good. What's 10 words after that? What's the 10 words after that? That's sort of the line, and that's actually verbatim almost from West Wing, I think, remember correctly. But the point is, you can have the first 10 lines, the headline, the snappy part of a tweet, and that can get you a lot of points. But it's asking me what's the next 10 words after that, and 10 words after that. What's the explanation that goes deeper? Hi, Grace Darcy. Hello, Nook. Very good. Will our own start using Azrock Rum 1 9. I think it would be massively have a it would massively increase our frigates ASW frigates capability. It would be nice. We'll see what they get. They're planning on putting a Mark 41 VLS on, but I'm thinking it might end up being Talam focused and loadout. Um, Tyler Rose. Hello, Tyler. What are the conditions like for different navies through the age of sail? Depends what you're talking about. As a rule, some of the cleanest ships in the world were the Royal Navy ships, despite them often being the ones most often at sea. Mainly because they were obsessed that cleanliness basically made them healthy and kept them healthy because they were at sea. Whereas a lot of ships where they were spent more time in port tended to be dirtier because they could get ashore. But I have a feeling that's not specifically what you're asking about. If you could give me a slightly more fulsome question, I can probably give you a better answer to what I think you're asking for. But I wouldn't like to jump in because I might end up answering a whole question and it not be the topic thing you're asking for. Well, for Chicago, I think technically America's biggest trade partner in the Pacific is Canada. Technically, but in 1920s and 30s, Japan was the biggest one the other side of the Pacific. They had any trade going across their oceanic terms. Hello. Probably don't remember. I do think I remember your name. We met briefly on Haida. I'm glad to be chatting to you again. I do remember a Brad. So I think you're probably the one I'm remembering. I think I only met one Brad that day. Colin Cameron, the UK tried a republic, it did not last. The next republic the UK got a look at, we after the French Revolution, and even Napoleon went, no thanks. Yeah. Sean, I'm not even repeating that. No, we're not even getting there. Correct. I'm hoping the Tyrrhenian Fleet Destroyer will be like the strike cruiser and big vessels with 16,000 tons of displacement. If we don't get production numbers we need, I'm hoping we do, and they are, and we do. Sean McNair, who's the worst Admiral of World War II? Axis, Allies, or neutral? Oh. See, the trouble is, worst Admiral of World War II. You see, I would say if an admiral acts on the information they have available and acts with the best faith on the knowledge of the information they have available, then they're not a bad admiral. If they don't have a complete picture, because the enemy always gets a vote, they're not a bad admiral, they're just unlucky. And it's different being a bad admiral than being an unlucky admiral. But saying that, worst admiral of World War II? Probably with Adolf Hitler, because the moment he orders that you cannot use their capital ships and cannot send them to sea, you make the Royal Navy's job dramatically easier and probably shorten the war by 6 to 8 months. That's the truth. This is the point which people often forget when they're talking about the Battle of Atlantic. It gets dramatically easier once it's a single plane of attack. And that was the problem with the Type 21s, etc., and the vessels which were coming out based on sort of the whole idea they're going to make the war far more difficult because they're going to be able to underwater more and they're going to be true submarines and all this stuff. It's all true. But also, that means their attacks are going to be torpedo based attacks. They're not really likely to be using their guns, which means you don't have to worry about guns for your surface escorts into things other than AA duties. Okay, they're carrying torpedoes, and they're going to be relying on the fact, well, we've got homing torpedoes already entering service on the Allied side, so you'll just fit torpedoes to your escorts. And yeah, you've got a lot of frigates, you've got a lot of flyer class, you've got a lot of escorts to put in the water. It won't make life easy, but it won't make it more difficult. It won't make it too, that difficult either. Whereas if you're threatening with aircraft, i.e., Condors, if you're threatening with submarines, and you're threatening with major surface commands, you mean I have to focus my fleet on dealing with all those potentials, and I have to run my convoys based on dealing with all those potentials, and I have to design my convoys around dealing with all those potentials. That makes my life a lot more difficult. So, yeah. Worst Admiral World War Two? Hitler. All right, so the clock. How's the habitability on the flag class corvette? Um, it was 89 people crammed into a ship which was roughly 1,000 tons. So yeah, it was interesting, but not that bad. There are worse places to live. Basically, imagine a a very heavily confined summer camp, dorm accommodations. Wayne's website. We all know the ship's not built. Squad 1 especially interrupted what might have been the biggest technological jump in shipbuilding. Could certainly been interesting. Hi, Jamie. Hi, Aaron Countess. I'm in the kitchen because, as I said earlier, this is where the cable reaches to. It doesn't. King George's funeral was February 1952. Queen Elizabeth's coronation was June 1953. Hmm. Oh, if I turn the camera on my sister, she'll disappear. That was I love you, Queer. That's a brother. Great. What does Bill Trump's get posted? Normally it gets recorded on a Tuesday and posted on a Wednesday, but so far it's been recorded on Wednesdays, 2 weeks running, and it's posted when it happens. Appropriately depending on what happens. Paul from that's good enough. Had a weird but prominent career post shouldn't, and wasn't recalled in World War Two. Do you know what happened? Basically, he wasn't considered fit for duty. That's incorrect. Duchess Lancaster and Cornwall are not part of the Crown Estate. They're often included in the Crown Estates. There's okay. Crown Estates, when you're talking about in its full phraseology when using it, you include Duchess of Lancaster and Cornwall. You also include all the palaces, Windsor, those sort of things as well. So yeah, that's the full load, plus a few other investments. So yeah, you're both right, and you're technically right, I suppose, because well, they aren't part of it in terms of they aren't the crown estates because those are often used to refer to just Windsor, etc. But also sometimes, quite often, people who are only using the crown estates and they're talking about them, they conflate in the Duchies Lancaster and Cornwall as well. It gets fun when you're looking at some of the assessments and some of the write-ups and some of the ways people write it up. Thank you, Bob Fry. I said it wasn't that long. It was a few days shy of 16 months between George. Yeah, that was actually quite an extended one. For various other reasons, that kept getting extended. Would Putin be welcome to the funeral? I think he's already sent him his condolences and said he won't be able to make it. Mainly because he's probably worried he'd get arrested. Possibly by Boris Johnson. Poland will send the president and the PM. Or the PM. I just wish someone else was PM or president since the current ones are potatoes. Look, people voted for them. Blue 81. Hello. Is the reason Royal Navy submarine accomplishments during World War II played down because in a Allied public narrative, submarines presented as sneak weapons due to German U-boat warfare? Um, Honestly, no. It's just how do I put it? The Americans make a big song and dance about their submarine accomplishments. The British made a big song and dance about their submarine accomplishments during the war. There was a lot talked about in terms of what the U class were getting up to in the Mediterranean, etc. I know I've picked up some magazines this week, which was great. But from World War II, magazines from that period. But there are issues in terms of the how to put this, how the cultural narrative has been written since World War II. In that the submarine became very much the focus of the Cold War threat and very much focused on the Russians and very much focused on what the Germans did in Battle Atlantic. And so our own submarine accomplishments have been sort of forgotten and sort of stripped down the cultural memory in some regard that therefore we don't really remember them, so we sort of almost forget that they happened. That's it, Graham Hannon, Money, there is no set time. The coronation is more symbolic as such. You do not need one to be a monarch. Usually it's shorter, but yeah, it can be longer. It can take a while to organise a coronation, but as I said, it is fairly short, historically terms. However, the thing is, the last one was quite long, so long because they were rebuilding the abbey and they were all doing all sorts of things, and people worry about the cost of because of World War II, etc. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this time. Oh, right. Were factors other than number of guns and weight considered in rating age of sail capital ships? No, pretty much it was number of guns. Or your pierced for number of guns. So it's how many piercings you had, not the number of guns you carried, but how many piercings you had in your hull for guns. Because you usually carried more guns than you were pierced for. Because you'd have smaller guns up on the top deck, etc. Aaron Contreras, where were the best places to sail during the age of sail according to accountants? According to accounts, where are the best places to sail? I thought you said accountants there. I was going, well, that's to accountants. Anyone that's profitable. And likely to get home, so. Mediterranean was a fairly nice sailing. It was fairly good sailing in Mediterranean. The Indian Ocean sailors tended to like the Indian Ocean. It was tending to be quite a good ocean to sail in, but getting there was an absolute nightmare. Chris asks you, worst admirals surely Jen Sewell. Mm, uh, Considering the amount of videos I have coming out about French cruisers at the moment, I think if I am too rude about the French again, it's going to look like I'm anti-French. And the reality is I'm not. It's just they have an unfairly large amount of idiocy in when it comes to their ships and their admirals sometimes. I think it's because that they're always trying to look for a way to do it better on the cheap. Good night, Amelia. Where's all science technology? How much competition did Mussolini give Hitler's worst admiral? Mussolini didn't really get involved as much as Hitler did. He certainly didn't issue any claims of no capital ship deployments. Greg H. Any news on shipyard expansion? Not at the moment, but there again, that's to be expected. At the moment, all the news is going to be focused on one thing. This is Voxer. How serious was the Habakkuk proposal, and how would she have been used to build? What would she do in the Cold War? If built, she would have been a floating carrier in the middle of the Atlantic, bridging the air gap for ships, for battle groups going, convoys going across forwards. You probably wouldn't need the escort carrier program if you had that thing or a couple of them floating around the Atlantic. They'd suddenly be big enough. They'd be sitting there going, "Hello." Um, what else would they be doing? Might be used to launch strikes on Norway or as part of D-Day, but I doubt it. I don't think you'd end up with one popping into Mediterranean, but you never know. And if you took one to the Far East, the Japanese would probably have a panic attack because they'd just be looking going, "What the frigating frigate have you got?" As for the Cold War, again, you've got a massive, great big, basically mobile island or mobile iceberg. Imagine what you can do with that. You'd probably end up with ballistic missiles based on it, as well as a ton of aircraft. I too. What bad admiral captain do you think was unfair in Milan that suffered more from bad intel luck rather than failing apart? Mostly Italian admiralty. Speaking of the Beltrams, the Admiral Chabanenko and the Uloy 2 supposed to come out from major refit in November for acceptance trials. I'll cross fingers for them, but they actually float. Barbarossa, Dr. Clarke, not strictly naval, but who were Cisco's, Picard, and Janeway's RN counterparts? Hmm. For Janeway, I'd say look at the captain who's currently in charge of Dartmouth, I think she is. I think that's where she's taken over. Cisco and Picard. Picard is a Cunningham in that style. He's also, if anything, he's a Cunningham, he's a Collingwood. He's that style of commander. Cisco has the ability to be far nastier if he needs to be. And that's a VN. Archie, what would happen if the US prior to World War II decides to seriously design an aircraft carrier to handle medium bombers and acts like they are building it to mess with the other powers? Also, hi. Well, hi, Archie. Panic and construction. And probably the Japanese Shinano gets that built maybe a little bit quicker, maybe a little bit more effort put into her. So she can also take medium bombers. The British probably build something AK Malta sized because that would be able to be big enough and would have big enough lifts that it could take a load of mosquitoes, and that would be what they would be basically building. They build something, probably a supersized Ark Royal, Malta-sized Ark Royal, if you think about it, if you can imagine that. Maybe with an armored deck. And they probably build a couple of them. Then British, they build a few of them. Which is actually interesting, because if you did that, then you could end up with a carrier building race going into World War II, and could end up the British having more carriers in service, which would probably change the world a little bit. Let's see, various other reasons. Churchill wanting to maintain his position? There are almost so many options for that one. Churchill having lots of issues dealing with it. But also there were a lot of political discussions going on at that time. Okay, then, what was the World War II battleship was the most advanced in the war? Probably one of the hours. Because they're the most recent builds which actually sort of... I could pick King George V, but nah. Vanguard into service too late. But yeah. It gets changed, Stafford. Any politics one. Why is your sister so shy about being on camera? You told her us enough about her unique professional expertise to identify her, and also a picture on multiple uni websites and so on. She managed to avoid having many pictures on uni websites. She's fairly good at hiding those things. But basically, no, she just doesn't like the being on camera. She doesn't want to appear next to her brother. I would cramp her style. It's just terrible. What can I say? She'll put the dog up on camera, but she won't, talk, appear on camera herself. What it is to have me as your brother. Before anyone really gets a joke, you should hear noises coming from the other room. I love it, Eddie. Exactly. The distinction is that the incomes of the Duchy of Lancaster and Cornwall are not given over to Treasury in exchange for the civil list, unlike the Crown Estate. Um, there have been so many different settlements reached on that one, so I wouldn't want to get into that too much. Because, as I was understanding it, some of their incomes are now as well. But there was a whole debate a couple of years ago, and 4 years before that, and 4 years before that. Greg, I want the third Queen Elizabeth class and free Canberra class entities so we have free fleets. Why would you want Canberra class? Trieste. Look them up. They're far nicer. Canberras are the Australian version of the Spanish design, which is designed for very basically to be a slightly advanced version of HMS Ocean. If you want something which is a truly utilitarian vessel, then you're going for Trieste class as your basis. And free would be lovely. Because basically that gives you 6 flight decks. So that guarantees you 2 flight decks available. And the thing is that Trieste class can fill in for a Queen Elizabeth class, and a Queen Elizabeth class can't really fill in for a Trieste class as a dock, but they can for an LHP. So if you have some docks as well wandering around, then you're far better. Basically, what you need is free Queen Elizabeths, free LHDs, and free Bulwark style LPDs, and you'll always be able to guarantee the availability of at least 2 flight decks and at least 2 docks. Personally, if you want to lump them all together as Crown Estates plural, fine, but that wasn't the point of the original question. It was as I read it, but yeah. Don't worry, Greg. Also, yeah, my sister's main view on YouTube is that she does, because I try and get her to set up her own channel because I think it'd be fun because she is such a good engineer. She is a really, really smart engineer, really good at what she does. I try and get her to set up her own channel. So does Thrak, because of course she taught him. So and that's the way she's got the seal of approval from Drac as being really, really good. But no, she does enough online teaching, etc., using Teams, etc. She doesn't want to do more on YouTube, but I tell her to do it because she doesn't get enough respect or enough. I would say she doesn't get treated as well as she should for all she's done. She's got chartered in both the Institute of Civil Engineers and the surveyors, the Royal Institute of Surveying. She's correcting me. I got those wrong. ME. ABE. What's that? Okay. Different. So she got chartered in 2 different groups of engineers. She's Institute of Structural Engineers, sort of thing. Anyway, She's just really, really, really smart. And she doesn't get enough credit. Remember, Dr. Clarke, yes, Clarke is viewed as the peak USN World War II carrier development. Is there anything the Yorktowns did better? Well, A, it's the Midways, which are peak USN World War II carrier development. And I know some people view the Essex, but Midways are better. Yorktowns did better. I would say the Yorktowns were better for sustainability of operations. They had a lot of better, had much better spaces for preps of machinery and maintenance of aircraft. I'm sure he'll televise it. Only if he doesn't, I think my mother would be leading the charge to be there with a camera. Grey H, is Iron Brew a good mixer? It does, but it does go some interesting colours. But go doing it. Could Nelson class shoot US 16-inch shells? I think they did look into it and they decided not to do that. But it wasn't because they didn't have the capacity. I think it's because they just decided that the modifications necessary. Hello? I was wondering if the lights had blown then, but no, it appears to all be working. Okay, let's hope the internet's still working. Yes, the internet is still working, still connection, so that's good. But no, on the Nelson class and 16 inch shells, basically we had enough shells in stock, we didn't need to do it. But I have a feeling if you'd had a Lion class entered service, it might well have been found that they designed the guns so they could work together and interchange the shells, especially for any Pacific operations. For a look at how the public viewed the submarine service during World War II, the film We Dive at Dawn was shot during the war. Yeah, I know. It's a good film. Thanks for it. Represent the clock. Would a depth charge or hedgehog squid projectile work as an airdropped bomb? How effective? Depth charges were actually dropped from the air. I don't know if they ever did the hedgehog or squid projectiles, but depth charges were dropped from the air and they did work. That was, if you look at the Sunderlands, that's one of their chief things they carry, a whole load of the largest, heaviest depth charges they could fit. To HMS Habakkuk, the world's first mobile sea base. It would certainly have been interesting. It would probably have changed the entire picture of where they went with Captain Scarlet and the Skybase, and probably Marvel's, where the Avengers had their base. Not the Avengers, the Shield had their base with their helicarriers. Because why would you want a helicarrier base if you could have a heli iceberg base? Yeah. Think about this. How do you get a Habakkuk to Japan built on Pacific? How much more would they melt in the warm Pacific? Well, that's the thing. The whole point of it was it had enough of a mixture of sawdust in the ice and machines to keep it cool. It shouldn't melt. So it should, in theory, work okay because you'd be working at roughly the Pacific. Yes, you would pass through some warm waters, but you'd be going up. Hmm. Let's put it this way: be interesting to see. It would work, but it would to get into the Pacific. You would have to take it round either the Cape of Good Hope or the ooh. Horn of Africa. Hmm. Yeah, that'd be fun. It'd be depending which direction you took it round. Would you take it the South Atlantic, South America route, Or would you take it the Africa Indian Ocean route? Probably take it right down to the Antarctic and take it through that ocean. Bring it up from there. I'm sorry, there are so many fighters buzzing around your building today, Wayne. Yeah, yeah, Aaron Counters. I wonder if they put missiles on Hamburg during the Cold War. Yeah, they'd have put missiles on it. It'd be massive. Everything they could have put on it would have been put on it. That's awesome. We're Republicans. Have you seen any thoughts on thought out plans for British beyond aha, I'm not bad? If so, what do you think of them and what would Republican Royal Navy be called? They change their minds every 5 minutes. And no, I haven't seen any plan which really properly works it through. Usually it's go, we get rid and we replace them with this. And it's a case of, okay, that's fine, but have you thought through the second, third, fourth, and fifth order effects that's going to have? And the way you're going to have to change the whole constitution. Because you get rid of the monarchy, you are going to have to get rid of. Usually the things that goes, oh, we just fold on all the monarch's powers and duties to the prime minister. Okay, do you realize how powerful you would then be making the office of the prime minister? Because there are a lot of things which are theoretically the monarch's power. So technically, the prime minister, whilst they exercise it, because remember they reign and the monarch rules, they have to go and technically ask the monarch for it, which means they have to technically go and ask someone else before they can do it, which provides just that bit of level of protection against someone actually doing it. Or they go, we'll give this thing to Parliament, or we'll give this to that. And there's going to be an absolute bun fight. The only way you get rid of the monarch is you have to have a massive constitutional settlement. And that means you have to redo the constitution, which means you also then have to work out how you're going to codify into a constitution all the devolved governments. Then you're going to have to do the settlement of what does England, the form of devolved government does England get. Then you're going to have to work out how the different powers of those governments, what their roles are going to be, what their boundaries are going to be. What kind of devolved government do you set up in England in the first place? Do you leave England as one devolved government, or do you divide it into multiple devolved governments? Either way, if England gets a devolved government, that's problematic. Because the trouble is, then there's going to be someone who's going to be arguing, hang on, why are we paying for all this? And yeah, it gets very problematic very quickly. It's a case of, I can see where they're coming from. There are many people who I admire who are ardent Republicans. I don't agree with them because I like having a monarchy and because honestly, I think the changes you'd have to make would be an absolute frigating nightmare. And I don't see the point in changing something which ain't broke. But what can I say? There are people who are more committed to an ideal world than a real world in this world. And I have respect for them for having such commitment. To carry building racing model, that's sort of fun sentence for the Kriegsmarine, Marine, and IJN. No, it isn't, because let's be honest, if you have any kind of actual naval race going on, going into World War II, then probably the ones at the front of it are the British and the Americans. Especially if it starts off in the mid 1930s. That's fine. Does royal family have to pay property tax? They don't have to, but they do actually pay the taxes on the things because they choose to. As in, the thing was technically we raise taxes in your name, so technically we can't charge you tax. Have you willingly decided to pay tax? So we are not going to push this issue. Archie, what happens if the 1989 Soviet Navy replaces 1936 Soviet Navy? The Kriegsmarine cries a lot. Maintaining it would be a nightmare, but it would be interesting to see what happened. Right, Vanette, do you think any of the World War II era vessels could be modernised to serve today if they are kept? I think you could have kept some of the larger ships in service, but again, they probably wouldn't still be serving today because there's a hull life factor, so hull fatigue. And okay, yes, you could have kept them in reserve and looked after them that way and carefully taken care of them, but they don't tend to do that. Thereabouts. I think the Queen won't personalise its business rates are favourable to the Crown Estate and Dutch properties. I think they do, but they don't have to. As I said earlier, I think the thing is they raise tax in the Queen's name, and therefore the Queen technically doesn't. Technically, whether she has to pay or not is a grey area of law which no one's got into because she's kindly volunteered to pay tax. And I have no doubt that Charles will continue that idea. Well, Russo, with the benefit of hindsight, do you think the 1983 commissioning hours was a good idea? They've had worse. Security trap. Having seen both a Fletcher and Travel Class destroyed in person, what difference in the two have you come to appreciate that you didn't realise until you've seen your own eyes? Quite how big a difference designing a ship around. Um, it's going to sound strange, focused around independent work versus fleet work changes the hull shape. Because really, the tribals do look like a long range for a cruiser. They do really look like a cruiser. And whereas the Fletchers look like big, powerful destroyers, they really do look like a cruiser. Where is it? Your sister could set up a channel and just not do lives. I suggested this. Where is it? Yeah, we've done new cruisers are on the next build trumps coming up. No, don't think the midways were finished before the end of the war has ended. I think one was in service just as the war ended, or just about entering service. But they're good.
Miss.
Okay, well, you can clarify.
I'm only assault for it.
You're associated for Ricks.
Yes.
And you are structurals?
No.
No, ICE?
ICE, yes.
Yes.
Association of Building Engineers.
Association of Building Engineers. Okay.
MCIOB.
MCIB, Chartered.
Construction Manager.
Basically, you've got how many letters after your name?
26.
26 letters after her name. Some of us make do with just PhD, MRes, and BA, but you know, she's got 26. She's smart, as I said. Very, very smart. Hello, Sea Dollars. There's no surge protector on this system at the moment. Mainly because it's being used elsewhere. But again, did any navies share major naval calibers with shells of another country? I think the Dutch and the Swedish were sharing stuff. Jack Ray, by the way, I suggest getting a voltage regulator for your new computer setup. It helps smooth out power variations that a surge protector does not. I will look into it. As long as I have the money in the kitty when I go to do it, I will get it, or I will get it down the street, down the road. See, Dollars, if the multi-class was built and entered service, would the RN also build a Minotaur 1947 class as a provider squad? Unlikely. But you never know. So, anyway, how bad would it be to a crew member on the Haberback? It would be a kind of interesting command structure. I have a feeling the chiefs would have had to have had even more power for latitude in discipline management than they normally did. Again, was the US the only country to limit their ship size to Panama Canal? Yes, because it makes sense for the US to limit it to the Panama Canal because they have to get it through there. Whereas this is the point I sometimes make, which causes people to have panic attacks when I say, well, the British were also preparing to fight a Pacific War, and they go, well, no, they haven't got their ships, haven't got the range to do this and this, and you're going, but the British ships are not going to come across the Atlantic, in the Caribbean, Panama Canal, and across the Pacific that way. They're going to go through the Mediterranean, down North Atlantic, through the Mediterranean, Suez Canal, Indian Ocean, around Singapore, and up through the South China Sea. That's a very different route. That requires very different logistics. That's going to be a very different ship criteria when you can balance it against other things than you're going to build it for the other way. And that causes people to go, ah, I know most of you on the channel have heard this before, but you know. Richards, have you sold your books? Not yet. I'm hoping to get deals signed for 2 books in a not too distant future. They're written and going in, and then I'm going to get work on a few other things. And frankly, there is part of me which is tempted to say that if I don't get a publisher for the one I'm working on about the Third Sea Lords, I might end up self-publishing it on Kindle and just setting it about £6 or something and just see if I can sell a few copies. Then, of course, if I'm going around the Cape of Good Hope, I'd want to be in Habakkuk. It's about the only thing which would be stable in it. Thank you for the family holiday fund. Thank you. Thank you, Bijon. Yeah, don't get me started on family holiday fund. Port Isaac. Expensive place. Lovely, very beautiful. Ouch. My coach. Okay, the Allies introduce Habakkuk. You are CNC Axis naval strategy. What would you do to counter them or destroy them? You have total control of naval air assets and a good chunk of industrial capacity. Cry. What is it that they had to destroy them? Well, theoretically, if I fire enough torpedoes at them, I might sink them, but I'll probably run out of torpedoes from a submarine, so I'll need to organize an entire wolf pack to be emptying torpedoes into it to have that chance. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be fun. I would need something. Pardon me. That was a little burp there. But sorry. I was thinking the nose that came out. It would have to probably be fuel air explosives. I would probably have to go for melting the ice. If I could make it melt. So either making it melt or try and make it uninhabitable. I'd either need to crack it or melt it. Either way, I would need to launch either a massive airstrike or a massive submarine strike on it. And the thing is, it's going to have escorts. And the thing is, that the Habakkuk, that's the whole point of it, is if you built it big enough, it would be its own docking facility for escorts. You can imagine, you could have literally a wharf along each side where escorts could tie up and be resupplied by cranes from inside it. It would just be, you were talking about something which is absolutely is a floating sea base. But again, so is the Prime Minister like more powerful US Speaker of the House? No. Imagine it. They have. They are basically fusing the government powers of the president to. This is a very rough analysis. I know someone's going to correct me and go, it's not quite the same, but it's something for people to think about as a basic starting point. It does need to be more nuance and context in it. But think of it roughly as introducing the powers of government of the president with the powers of the Speaker of the House in the US terms, in that they have both the largest party in the Commons, and they're the head of it, and they are also the head of the executive. Hello, Eric. No emergence. Hello. Means what? Talking hull fatigue. Looking forward to seeing the maintenance report in Texas. It's going to be massive and expensive, but I have a feeling someone's going to find the money for it. Judging from talking with some of my Texas friends. Rather interesting. I've been curious as to what a modern battleship would be like. 2023 hours armed with 916 railguns. You see, it would be interesting to see what they do because they probably go back with railguns because they're so much more powerful. They probably go back to something like an 8-inch railgun to start off with for the first generation, and then you get a race of development because they start off going back because you can then carry so many rounds, and then someone else would go, well, I can build something bigger than that. And they're not going over 10-inch because 10-inch is that difficult size to set even railgun forms. 10-inch is still not a good gun caliber. So they probably go with 12-inch. And yeah, then they would probably end up going to 14-inch and then 16-inch, and who knows what it'd be by now. But if they're starting off with railguns in 2023, it's probably going to be 8-inch ones, like they're working on for the Zumwalt class. But again, 8829. Have you watched any of the former US Texas dry docking? Yes. Thank you, Bishop. Today was expensive. Oh, but it was a good day. It was a lot of fun. But seriously, if you're taking a family to Cornwall, do not think because you're holidaying in the UK it is going to be cheap. Luckily, I knew this and I budgeted. But the price of pasties these days. The price of pasties. Not let alone fish and chips. Pasties. Just gone up. Christopher, what's the RN 1910s RN reaction to if you delivered a full engineering plan to Yamato? Build it. Probably they take it apart and they build a better version of it. I have a feeling the 1910, if you've got their designs to Yamato as their starting point, I'm fairly sure Parsons and Brown would both tear the engine designs apart, build something approximating it, and then look at it and go, we can build better, and would build something better. I'm fairly certain the 18-inch gun they'd work on, armor they could probably try and figure out. But yeah, they'd have a lot of fun with it. Radar, it would be a head start and start off on that. So yeah, it would be very interesting to see what they would the 1910s Royal Navy would do. But give them, if you get in 1910, give them 2 years to dissect the plans, build stuff, and try and replicate it, and then 2 years to build something. You probably have an 18-inch armed battleship launching in 1914, just to give the world a panic attack. That might actually lead to peace in terms of the German Navy. The German government might actually formally renounce their naval plans, at which point the British probably leave the Entente Cordiale because they're not really getting on with the Russians and they're not getting on with the French. As much as they prefer the French to the Russians, they're not really. The Russians keep causing trouble off the India and Afghanistan. So yeah, and in China. Yeah, Haliakas. Yeah, Midway enters service just after VJ Day, but it's close enough that she's built during World War Two. So I would say yes, they are. But Yukas, did you see the Corgi retweet? And have you tested this buoyancy display? No, I haven't tested buoyancy display yet for a Corgi. I will say our Corgi is very buoyant, although he has his tail, so it doesn't naturally come up at the rear like that. And both canines are rather keen on the concept of hot tub, although there is a debate about whether or not they're allowed in one. The only person who seems to forget that is me. My last question: it's Mid World War Two. If you could only have one class of iron destroyer in Ethos, which class would be? And same number of ships, but only one class. 42 to 43. Can only have one class of service and iron destroyer in service. Can I have the battle class in service? I'll take the battles. They are technically in service by the end of the war, but no, if it's in 1942, then I probably would go for tribals if I have to go for ships that was built before then. But considering the battles are ordered at that point, I'd go for the battles. All right. Dutch and Swedish did share some naval ammunition, but that was because the Dutch used Swedish Gobos guns as the main armor for DDs and CLs. Yeah, and it works. But that's basically the criteria of when you do start showing these ammunitions. So I don't know, how do the crew of Habakkuk deal with constant cold? Dress warmly. That's how they would deal with it. That's how the British tend to treat it. Da da da. And drop thermite bombs if you have them available. There's a Foxer. Do you know any books on the Norman English, and Norman Sicilian navies? How much of the Norse of shipbuilding did they keep and adapt after existing European shipbuilding? I don't know any books on them currently. I do know Simon Elliott has been considering working on one, and I think if enough people nag him on Twitter, he'll probably do it because he considers them in some respects a continuation, especially Norman Sicilian one of the Roman. Hmm. Making it melt would require entirely too much energy. That will not be possible. The only thing that would have a chance would be cracking the small pieces. Well, actually, the thing I was trying to suggest was if you had enough heat on the outside, and that was the thing. If you had the fuel explosive going, that would weaken the surface of the ice enough, weaken the surface bonds enough that if you hit it with a bomb, you would have more of an impact. Because I was thinking kind of like the ice forming like steel armor, and like the army sort of build up where you push in a lot more carbon on one side to give it sort of more rigidity, and then it sort of turns into sort of armor to become armor plate, and turns into iron, more ironish steel with different strengths, that sort of thing going on. So the way the Habakkuk ice, one of the papers I was reading about it described it was sort of that style. So I was thinking if you manage to cause enough heat, i.e., hence using the fuel explosive, I suppose thermite if you've got that available, on one side would sort of start that sort of side, the armor side, the outside melting, and then hit it with bombs, and you could crack it. But it would require a lot of bombs. It would require tall boy sized bombs, and a lot of them, hitting rather close together in terms of area. So, how many heavy guns would you have placed on Havoc? 100 plus? Oh, a lot more than that. A lot more than that. It would be a lot of guns. Um, E-bike them. Right. Who is number two behind the Prime Minister? Well, that's an interesting thing because we have a poster called First Secretary of the Treasury, who is the constitutional number two. But we also have sometimes someone called the Deputy Prime Minister, who sometimes isn't the First Secretary of the Treasury. So, yeah, there's an interesting debate on that one. Richards, how do you foresee the shutdown of major metals affecting the production of such things as armor, shells, etc.? That's just going to cause a nightmare. If you can't actually produce it, then you can't produce the armor. Brad, I was being a bit sarcastic about it. I didn't actually think they had the technology yet. They have the technology. They don't have it made. Don't have it practical yet. They have the technology. They have working railguns. They just aren't working to the level at which they are not extremely exotic things that you cannot really integrate into a warfighting vessel. So that's the problem. It's one of those things. It's a active. It was made a naval project, and then it was returned to DARPA, and they're still working on it. And they've got the gun. They've been test firing it. It's working, but it's turning into something which you can actually fit on a ship and scale it to work on a ship. Habakkuk would likely self-heal cracks, but it would take time to self-heal the cracks. Whereas if you've got enough bombs hitting quickly enough, it won't heal them. And also, the thing is, it might heal the cracks, but it might not heal the cracks in a way which actually doesn't introduce more issues into the vessel's stability profile. Yes, Paul Better, we're going to try and visit those shipyards archives. That's something I'm really looking forward to and trying to work on. It's a basic case of, again, money, time. The problem with railguns is the power requirements vary with the square of the size. So a 2-inch railgun with a very long projectile can hit harder than a 4-inch. Yes and no, but you can do a lot of. The main problem with railguns is that the power requirements go up, but also your ability to use capacitors and to store the energy needed to do it. Now, you could hook it up to a nuclear reactor, which might provide the necessary power, but most people don't want to put nukes on everything. So it's developing our capacitor technology, which is why I think companies like Tesla are going to soon find themselves getting involved in the arms business because they are at the forefront of capacitor technology. Richards, watched the US Navy present the railgun to the media for the first time on Military Channel when it still existed years ago. When the Admiral said was what the Admiral said was very interesting. What are pasties? Cornish pasties are these lovely, how do I put it, things which have basically it's a pastry with all the filling inside. Imagine it's a pie, but it's a sort of half moon shape, the crust all round, and it's nice. I'm not going to hunt pictures because I'm fairly certain this whole setup is running by luck, prayer, and fingers crossed. Aaron, the thing that railguns is that they don't need a powder charge, so they become viable when the energy source is smaller than the equivalent of the powder magazine. Mm-hmm. So why do people chop off the tails of corgis? Well, probably like they did what used to do for spaniels, because they dock them because those tails can go at a million miles an hour and will knock lots of things over. Restaurant, did they use scale models in the old development of auto-loading turrets? I don't know if they did for all of them, but I do know one where they did. Um, Again, did the Royal Navy have any 18-inch gun battleship designs in World War II? They had some designs, yes. Oh, two. If you could bring one ship design forward by 20 years, which would you pick and why? Hmm. 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 Nelson and Rodney. I could take them back by 20 years. They'd appear in same time as they'd appear instead of Dreadnought, and just imagine what fun they would cause then. Take care, Wayne. Dana Feathercup. Hello, that's it. In World War II, who had the submarine with the lowest crush depth? That is a debate because different nations claim different statuses, stats. Um, Honestly, I think it's probably between the Americans and the Germans, but I don't think the Brits are far behind. And that's mainly because the Brits, ones that are deepest operating, don't actually get to operate in the deepest waters a lot, so they don't really get tested out. Samira, how would the 1997-98 Royal Navy deal Law and Voldemort? Submarine launched Tomahawk cruise missiles backed up by Harriers. Crying, 4-5 engage. um, that's not really something I thought about a lot. SBS sniper. And so I'm rather interested in those papers that have to say because it doesn't sound like anything I have to know. Well, you have to remember, ice isn't what the Habakkuk is made from. It's always called as ice, but actually it's a mixture of water, ice, but also sawdust in it. So it's made of pykrete, I think it's called. So it's actually has some very interesting properties. And again, I think the concentration, the amount of sawdust, etc., was going to be thicker in the outer shell than it. There was a whole paper, which was kind of interesting discussion. from about the 1940s. I think I was reading it in the National Archives, but I'm not 100% sure. It could have been in another archive. After a while, if it's been long enough, since you read them, they all sort of emerge into, and you have to hunt down notes. Concurrent, the best deputy prime minister ignoring politics was John Prescott, an honest man that had an honest reaction to a cured predecessor. Yeah, Prescott was a character, is a character. It's 1950 in Britain. It's Britain. It's the same as our timeline up until the point you have 4 to 5 Maltas coming to service. Snap the pound and the economy begin growing rapidly to where they were in 30s and then stay, maybe even grow for at least 20 years. You're the Admiralty. What do? Party. Party like it's 1920 and 1933. Probably build jets. Start ordering nuclear submarines. Beat our chest and do whatever the ministers want us to do. And I think Tesla is a forefront of capacitor research. They are doing a lot of work with it in terms of their batteries, but also in terms of what they've done in Australia, etc., where they're structuring their batteries as a sort of a national grid capacitor system. And it's basically the battery systems they're working on are still technical batteries, but they're moving closer to what we would call capacitors in some regards. It's an interesting area of discussion, debate. It's something which I sit in a room of a load of engineers who are far more knowledgeable than I on this topic, having the discussion, listening to the discussion, going, okay. Nice ignorant one. Alternate timeline. The Hood takes the fatal shell around the belt, but damages the control is alerted and prevents the ship's explosion. Okay. Bismarck Shell has destroyed one of her Curtis Brown geared steam turbines, maybe two. How do the British get out of this mess? Well, seeing as Prince of Wales will still be firing, probably what happens is Hood slows down immediately, at which point there are destroyers still coming up and various cruisers around. So the odds are the Germans continue on and they don't circle in for a kill, because it's one thing is saying it's, oh yes, we can circle in for a kill. If she's still firing, that's more problematic. If you've got Prince of Wales carrying on firing and keep fighting you, then that's problematic. And you've got two county class cruisers, so you are probably going to carry on in your merry way. So yeah, it's probably a simple thing of she just falls out of line and lets the battle go past her. And then, well, she gets a tow back to harbour and fixed. What would be the impact of the idea of composite armour in warships discovered in either 1910 or 1932? If it was discovered in 1910, it would be interesting. In 1932, you might actually see the 12, 14-inch gun King George V come into service. But there again, it's building composite armor that can actually work in terms at the level of the 14 of the ammunition. You're talking about 16-inch guns. It'd be interesting to see what would happen. It would probably be secondary armor and fulfilled in certain areas on the ship. It would probably be things like where they're applying splinter protection and protection for certain spaces like that would get the composite armor rather than the armor class steel if it's light enough. That's around. F1's European part of the season is done. Verstappen won. He can take the championship to Singapore next time. Ricardo broke down and caused Goes behind safety car ending. Ouch. But again, do you see any militaries using light fixed-wing attack aircraft again to support ground troops or special forces in order to save money and wear and tear on their frontline jets? It would be sensible, but they're probably going to go the drone route. No, they said, if by lowest you mean deepest, Kriegsmarine had the deepest diving submarine of the war. Yeah, but some of the American ones operated pretty darn deep, so I think. Yeah, it's the thing is, in theory and practice, what are your nighttime productions? What are your thoughts about these two ships with like 20,000 tons of Japanese government? Um, Basically, they'll be interesting, especially if the Japanese build two. I have a suspicion the Japanese will build more than two. In which case, I think they're going to be cruisers. Although they're going to be called destroyers, but there again, they call their aircraft carriers destroyers. They call everything destroyers if it's a big warship. So basically, they're the destroyer navy. Everything's a destroyer, but it's just a very specialist form of destroyer. Nice hearing. Why didn't the British offer the Majestic class light carrier HMS Leviathan to Spain? Probably, if it's anything, it's something to do with the fact that Franco and we didn't really like him. Sea Dodders, are there any notes on what the USN thought of the battle class when one showed up in the British Pacific Fleet? I don't think so. I've read specifically. Probably because they didn't get enough time to really operate alongside each other. If they'd operate alongside each other, then there probably would have been something written about it. But again, how much of an impact if the French scored the goal maybe hit against Hood instead of the Germans? If the French had scored it, that would have been but also that would have probably caused interesting reactions in other spaces. It could have led to accelerations of other programs. If you lose something like Hood earlier in the war, that's going to affect how the rest of the war goes. The later you lose Hood, the more of a continuity effect it has rather than a dramatic effect it has. That's Aaron. What wasn't sure if I asked this week. Why keep the 916-inch guns on an 85-ton battleship when you have enough space for a fourth triple turret? And what additional guns? Because there are some, you might theoretically have the space, but do you have the tonnage for it? How much of your space has gone on armor? How much of your space has gone on armor? How much of your space has gone on power, i.e., engines and fuel? And then, of course, you've got your secondary weaponries, secondaries, and your other systems. So, yeah, there are reasons for it to have still only 916-inch guns. Seneca Near. A refitted hood turns up with scuffle of flans with modern gas turbine engines, VLS, close in systems, refitted to a 2022 standard. What does Britain do with it? Still has 815-inch guns, museum ship or active duty? Well, if you've got all that, and it's refitted up to modern crew standards, probably the Royal Navy gets a new flagship. At least for a few years, because that's going to be cool to load around in. And just imagine how fast that hull builds as it was, but with modern gas turbine engines, VLS cells, you've probably got a few hundred of those. Yeah, that's a very useful ship. For those interested, the USNI has more on their website about the Japanese new destroyers. And the video I saw speculating that they used the hull their new carrier and built it to, in effect, a missile cruiser standard. That would certainly be sensible. If you think of that, if you had enough dry dock space, you could do that at the Queen Elizabeth hull. Oh, imagine the ship you sort of the ship you could fit on the Queen Elizabeth hull, glass hull. It'd be interesting. That could be Queen Elizabeth II. Although, hmm, we wouldn't really call it that. Okay, big fluff. Good boy. Hello. Okay, you've now got up. You were asleep and happy. You rolled over. I patted you, which is what I presumed you want, and now you're stood up. What do you want? Oh, you're doing your yoga poses. I don't know if anyone's realised that actually downward dog should be christened downward poodle, because the only breed I know who do that pose are the poodles. Nice, Aaron. So the British had the forces to do a naval blockade in the Falklands, but politics gets in the way. You didn't answer the question. How much damage could a blockade have done in reality to Argentina, and how would that have been done? Surface ships, submarines, or submarines alone? Submarines as the inner rung, surface ships as the outer rung. Damage, it could have done a lot of damage to their economy, but it would also disrupt trade throughout South America, etc. And yeah, it would be politically a nightmare, and so wouldn't have been ever been done. Actually, turning a CV into a CCG was an idea for several Colossus class ships, wasn't it? They did certainly consider it at one point. It would have been interesting. Does appear like I've caught up the questions. That's fun. I will admit that whilst I do love these evenings, and I will not keep this going on too late because, as said, I am crossing fingers when it comes to this internet. And that is a reality. So it's a case of, yes, I'll keep going a little bit longer, but. My questions: would HMS Lilibet be an appropriate name instrument given the Queen title is already in use? Probably not. No, sorry. What is the difference between a ship and a submarine launched torpedo Model 2? Uh, Mostly their shaping and operational systems, i.e., how you start them, where the positions on various things are. Okay. But again, did the Queen Elizabeth and Prince of Wales swap crews so the Prince of Wales crew could get some time working with the F-35s? I don't think they have. I wouldn't be surprised if some key personnel have magically transferred ships, but not the whole crew by any stretch of the imagination. No, there are documented cases of a U-boat reaching 310 meters and returning to the surface. Yes. There are also some cases of the Americans doing some very interesting operations, which were very, very interesting in terms of depth. I would say the RM managed to capture a ship named Enterprise and decide to press her in service. What would they rename her to be with an HMS Enterprise already in service? Well, if they're capturing a ship named Enterprise, it's either going to come from France, Enterprise, or from America, isn't it? So yeah, that would depend on how much who they want to annoy and troll. Because if they were trolling the French, they'd probably pick one of the other French names of ships they've captured over the years. If they were trolling the Americans, there are so many different names they could come up with. Getting tired, Doc? Not tired so much as we're down here for parties and family things. And whilst I don't mind an evening off to talk to all of you because it's rather a nice let's put it this way, it's rather a nice relaxing session for me. I love family. I do. They are wonderful people. But I enjoy breaks. We all do. Um, let's put it this way. I am not unique in my family in being a loud personality. We are all loud. So we are all quite extrovert, introvert, in a sort of loud personalities. And yeah, it's nice to get a few minutes break sometimes. I love it though. But I don't want to be away from too long because there are the family parties going on. Richards, the Japanese just developed quantum computing using a 3 qubit system instead of two. You're gonna see something now. Geordie and his love technology is a double-edged sword. Technology is definitely an interesting thing. How much personal stuff were the RN ship's crews allowed? They tended to basically be given a certain number of bags. You get your bag and gear bags, and then you had your space aboard a ship. You'd have a locker, etc. And it's whatever you could fit in your locker was your personal stuff and personal art. So you needed your clothes and the things you allocated for you doing your duties that would go in your locker, and the things you needed to maintain those clothes would go in your locker. And then whatever space was left over that, well, you could put in other stuff you wanted. I wasn't aware of anything even close to frenemies from the US submarines. Some of the operations they did off the coast of Japan, when they were doing some of their hiding, they went down really deep to avoid Japanese attacks and depth charge attacks. And so, yeah, it's a case of they didn't touch the bottom. And there is a debate as to whether or not they reached how deep they reached. But this is the thing. I would like to get one of my colleagues on to talk about that. There is something I'd like to sort of. I am. This is one of the realities that I often get discussed with people that go, "Why haven't you had other people on your channel? Why haven't you done that sort of level of recording and doing those extra things?" And honestly, it's because the laptop, as much as I love it, can't deal with that sort of thing. So this is something waiting for the PC. But I would like to get some of my friends, some of my academic colleagues on to discuss their work, to discuss their research, especially some of the PhD students who are not that good at publicizing themselves. I am. There is a general thing in academia that most academics are not very good at publicizing their work. And there is certainly a a sort of gender norm in that there is one group where female academics tend to be even less advertising of their work and their capabilities than males, but the males don't tend to be that good either. It's almost like a case of they're going, well, this guy's done this, and it's basically what you mean is he's done something. He hasn't done nothing. I am quite strange in that I tend to tweet out all the magazine articles I do. I tend to be quite public, and people then point out, go, well, there's this academic who also does that, and this academic, and I go, the fact that you can name pretty much all the academics who are good at publicizing their work tells you what a problem you're dealing with, because those are very, very much the tip of the iceberg when it comes to academics doing this work. So I would like to do more of that on this channel, and I will do more as time goes on, but it's waiting for me when I have the PC involved. But I have a friend who is more involved in that sort of area than I am. And I say, so what are the two winners? Which is patron 62 and which is patron 63? Well, you'll hear about that tomorrow in the video tomorrow, which comes out, which I recorded When I record tomorrow's video, was it last night or the night before? I've recorded up a batch of videos. Next week's videos have been recorded this week, sort of thing. Judy Hammond, a French naval base has 9% of the Mediterranean island of Ile de Lorient, but 10% of the island is a civil nudist colony. Is this an important base tactically or strategically, or merely handy? It's an interesting base. Strategically, it's not that bad. Gristle, how different or not different are Prince of Wales and Queen Elizabeth class CVs? Theoretically, not that different, actually. People try to talk up the differences, and the fact that Prince of Wales is somehow slightly longer, despite everything being put in being theoretically the same, it does cause a lot of fun, but yeah, they're pretty much the same. I was saving this for the French fight on live. Am I right that the end-on approach used by Hood and Wales favoured a ship like Rickaloo, and why? And if she is at Denmark Straits, how stuffed is Bismarck? It would have favoured the Rickaloo. It would have favoured Nelson and Rodney because they could bring all their guns to bear from at that point. And how stuffed is Bismarck? If the Rickaloo had been there, Bismarck would have been in a lot of trouble. But any extra ships you have there cause Bismarck a lot of trouble. Again, do you see any other European countries building nuclear-powered surface ships besides the French and Russians? The only ones who could theoretically do it really at the moment are the British, especially the Germans getting out of the nuclear operations really and getting out of the civil nuclear industry. The Italians theoretically have it there, but probably wouldn't either. And I don't see the Brits doing it at the moment. At the moment. Alfred BT28. Hello, Alfred. If World War I does not happen in 1914, but everyone can see war on horizon, what would the major powers' fleets look like in 1916 or 1918? The British would have gone on to the next evolution of guns before the beyond the 15-inch, which, as said before, my strong suspicion is it's not 16.5-inch, it's an 18-inch gun. And the Germans given up the ghost. So the German fleet will have fallen back quite a long way. The British fleet will look colossal, but probably will have got rid of some of their earlier dreadnoughts. Basically, all the pre-dreadnoughts will have gone by that point. Some of the earlier dreadnoughts, including Dreadnought herself, might well be in a reserve fleet status. It would be different. It would be their ships would be far bigger and far more powerfully armed. Then you'd have had the next round of infrastructure investment. Remember, that's due to take place in 14. So the infrastructure for Britain would have grown between 14 and 16. So yeah, the ships could have grown. And the Americans would probably be looking at their ships and going, ooh, what do we build? Especially if the British have come up with an 18-inch gun. Because the British know the Americans are looking at a 16-inch. So that's why they're not. This is the point. The British know the Americans have got a 16-inch gun. And the British have got the 15-inch in service. So, right then, if you jump 1.5 inches up, which is the normal British jump, it would take it to 16.5 inch. Now, 16.5 inch is not enough of a standard over an 18 inch, is it? It's not enough of a statement for the world's foremost naval power. So that means you only have one place you can jump up again if you go 1.5 inches, which is 18 inches. So that's the 18-inch gun, and I think that's what they're working on. I wouldn't be surprised if HMS Agincourt would be in service with 18-inch guns. What would have come next would be interesting. About what displacement would you exchange some VLS back lease, I think, back into old style arm launchers on the Service Command due to the square cube law and lack of deck space? That's an interesting question. I think I wouldn't want to lose more than I'd prefer if, let's say, I had a 96 style launcher, I prefer not to lose more than 16 of my VLS cells. But if I have to lose 24, I'll accept it. So basically 25%. As long as I've got more, I'm getting more missiles than that. But I prefer to lose none. And if what I can do is go da 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 ring and then put some launchers like that, so I've got a space which is, let's say, 4 by 8 long, and I can put 8 and 8 on each side, so I've got 16 here on each side. So I've got 32 there, and then I've got the remaining of my 96, which would be another 64 in front, and I can put my arm launch in the middle on maybe a sort of semi-raised platform. I'm happy with that. That's probably my best scenario. Then I don't have to lose anything, really. Well, I do lose, but not that much. And remember, so there's a fair bit of freeboard for a battleship, the most of any British ones at the least, I believe. The fact the ability to be a stable gun platform while they're keeping, it did have an impact, but because of the way they were designed, it actually worked out okay. It was counterbalanced by other points of their design. Uh, 1916 would be a lot of R class and Queen Elizabeths, and whatever comes after the Queen Elizabeths and the R class. So if you've had Agincourt built with 18-inch guns, expect the follow-up class to have had 18-inch guns, and there to be another 6 of those or so coming into service. Lastly, everyone, how easy would it be to turn a 24-inch Mark 1 torpedo into a submarine torpedo and give it a top-deck warhead? It would not have been that easy. It would have taken a lot of time. Mm. What was the iron ship that had problems with its mains water rusting or not being properly rated or something? Which one? There have been a few that have had that trouble. Even Queen Elizabeth had that trouble, I think, at one point. Seals, sometimes, especially. Let's put it this way: a seal is fitted, and it works well, but it's fitted in the construction phase. And then if there are delays in construction, by the time it gets into water, it might well have actually weathered and worn more than you were thinking it would. So you've got a theoretical life expectancy, and you've got its actual life expectancy, and it needs to be, then it fails. And sometimes these things just fail anyway. Anyway, so last are the Iron Bro. Mm-hmm. Boris, do you think the Boris boat will be built, or do you think it will be quietly forgotten? I think there will be a national flagship. How it will be built, what it'll be called, and what it will end up looking like will be is an entirely interesting thing that could happen. Of what could happen. I say, if you're in Spain, are you going to go for a boat-built ship that is double its weight and requires more crew and 60 more aircraft when you are to use it as an ASW carrier or a cruiser conversion? Complicated times. My coach, if you could magically have the complete plans for one piece of 1950-60 equipment appear on Admiral Hamilton's desk 1 week after he took office, what would it be and why? 4.5-inch deck gun, as fitted to the Daring class. And the reason why? Imagine the C class, the D class. Imagine all the Abdeel class, the mine layers, Manxman's. Imagine all those ships fitted with 4-inch guns, 4.7-inch guns, even the 5.25-inch guns probably, upgraded to just having the dual purpose 4.5-inch gun. Imagine the effect on logistics, imagine the effect on capabilities, imagine what you have in terms of a tribal class destroyer when it comes into service, imagine what the other destroyers are like. You have that twin gun when Henderson comes into gets in service. It'll be fitted to everything. And it will make a big, big difference. And it could be easily supported. Radar would be great. All those things would be great, but you're developing those anyway. The 4.5-inch gun is the thing which would have the biggest impact of things that weren't available at the beginning of war. There is a brand of gluten-free cereal behind me. Yes, it's my sister's. Why are we talking about putting arm launchers back? There is a current interesting debate about the fact that there is limited space there, that you have VLSs have limited space and stocking ships. And also there's the point of you rearming VLS at sea is very, very difficult. Whereas you could theoretically fit in a system where you could reload a magazine at sea. It's an interesting time. No, sorry, your laptop must be down. There are audio issues. The laptop is not liking some of the work I'm making it do. There are probably going to be some audio issues in the recorded videos that have been recorded down here. They're as good as I can make them, and I've listened through to them and they seemed okay, and that you could listen through and there wasn't any problems as far as I could tell, but you know, it went perfect. You missed this part of the question. Could SSN be designed for 24-inch torpedoes? Yes. Well, they could. You can design a torpedo for any a submarine for any kind of torpedoes. You can design it for it. You just have to make sure you have the equipment to support that 24-inch torpedo. But remember, that's also going to reduce the number of torpedoes you can carry overall, unless you increase the space allocated to torpedo storage. After B2 here in the US, there appears to be a growing interest of power companies to use modular reactors. Could the increase in the industry make something like a nuclear missile cruiser a cheaper prospect? Potentially. I know lots of people have been looking at the Rolls-Royce modular reactors in the UK. I know, those iron brew bottles are even getting smaller, you're drinking faster. It's the wine glass, it makes me sip it more. Dr. Clarke, I had this imagery of your current setup being chicken wire, balling twine, chewing gum, duct tape, and prayers to one or more deity. Me and the machine spirits have a close and ongoing relationship that does require much sacrifice and much attention. But Gay 889, do you see the retirement of the S3 Viking, no replacement, as a mistake? Yes, absolutely. Abazuski, why did the Iron actually start using 120mm 4.7 inch instead of going with some even number like 4.5 or 5 inch? Because it worked quite well. And they were happy with it. It was a very powerful gun when it was first introduced, and a very capable gun when it was first introduced. Constance, any news on the career front? Before I came away, had a very interesting virtual interview where I was, to an extent, virtually called a liar because of my pointing out the amount of research funding I managed to get thanks to doing this work on YouTube, etc., in terms of funding my research. I'm also going, well, how else do you think I'm paying for these things? I don't know. But no. It was a fun time. I don't think I'm going to get that job. Oh well. On with the applications. I keep writing books. And 120 millimeter is even, as Richards has pointed out. Too, aren't there Cold War plans for dropping mini nuclear reactor as a replacement for them 2500? I think there were some theoretical papers discussing it, but I don't think anything practical was ever really considered. If the S3 Viking second one wouldn't be up for replacement by now, probably. It should have probably been replaced in the 2010s. I like the Seawolf class SSN. I wish there were more than 3 of them. I think myself, if I'd been in charge of building them, I'd have said you build at least 8, preferably 9 or 10. Have 2 5-ship squadrons, and then you turn to Virginias. But the thing was, they were built at the end of the Cold War, and the idea was, hang on, we're not going to have to need submarines for this sort of high intensity killing anti-submarine war, killing other submarines, doing these operations. The Virginias will be perfectly good for what we need them to do. That's true. The Virginias are perfectly good for what you need them to do. The SSN, it's kind of like the F-22 versus F-35. Too, yeah, there was even a plan to replace the C2, E2, and S3 with a common airframe. That would have been very interesting. Scooter Scout, Andrea S3. I think core guns are better than rail guns, even with the extra technical complications due to less wear on the components. The MRLs need to be replaced after limited firings. There's a debate on that one because the rail guns are more accurate at longer ranges. The core guns provide the power to get to range, but they're not as accurate as a rule. It's a debate at the current technological interpretations of them. Please note, this is at current technological interpretations. There is a theoretical way of getting further and more accurate with the core gun, like there's a way of getting theoretically less wear and tear of the rail gun. It'll be interesting to see how these things evolve. Until something practical is actually deployable and actually made for ships, we do not know which way these things are going to go. When you say research funding, do you mean actual grants or whatever for research or monies that those of us in the community have donated? Pretty much what you have donated, because that was the thing. We were sitting there talking about my research and working there going, well, how are you sustaining this? How are you funding this? Because your current employment doesn't include research funding. And I went, well, I have my YouTube channel and the money which very nice people have donated, etc. And, how people sort of support my channel and that sort of thing. And Patreon and Super Chat, Super Thanks, all the money you very kindly send my way that I do inform the tax man on, and I do sort of make sure I pay taxes on and sort that out. Yeah, they basically said we don't believe anyone gives that amount of money on that sort of thing. We don't. No. It's only for computer games. No one serious does it. No one gets any real money over it. I was sort of going, well, actually, one of my best friends runs it, works his entire life based on that. And that caused an entire another debate about whether or not that was real history. So, that was a fun virtual online interview, which was one round. It was supposed to be the next round would have been the in-person interviews, and I said, I don't think I'm going to be getting invited for them. Customers, well, this is all in classified info. What are your thoughts on the RN setup? I like them. That's without divulging classified info. That's what I'm saying. I like them. Nice one, I2. Why did the plan to replace the S3 Viking, C2 the Greyhound, and E2 Hawkeye with one A-frame never go ahead? As it makes sense, they all need replacing. Money. They just reconditioned the E2s and C2s and decommissioned the S3s. Money in politics, if we're being completely correct. No, so the 21-inch torpedo was a perfect balance, wasn't it? It was what they focused on. 18-inch torpedo was also pretty much loved. Usually the lightest and easiest to load. Hi, too. The USN has already got their rails up to 1,000 plus firings per rail, much better than the BB guns. Still wasn't good enough for the beam counters used to the Mark 45's barrel life. Thank you, Not Wolf. Okay, no one gives that amount of money. Yeah. It's one of the things I find strange because here is the thing: the same people had in earlier discussions we've been talking about crowdsource funding, etc., and various things and how that impacts politics and international relations because that's where one of their research emphasis and discussions have gone down. And I'm sitting there going, so you say crowdsource funding is having an impact or is a perfectly viable thing for a political campaign to do, but basically, this version of crowdsourced funding of naval history research isn't, and cannot. I must be lying about it. That just seems a little bit absurd. But no, it was a fun. It was a fun interview. It's given me a lot of food for thought to think about, and I always let's put it this way: you learn a lot from interviews. And you also learn about the institution you're going to. And I always ask questions. I always ask questions. And the thing is, you have to remember that you aren't going to be a perfect fit. You apply for the job because it looks like you fit on paper. But sometimes you're just not going to fit the department. And that your interview is a chance to work that out because you don't want to work that out when you're in the department. Especially not when you're working towards tenure and then you find you're in a department which really doesn't want you to be there, where you really don't fit. Because then you either lose all the work you've got to tenure, or you have to stay there, or you have to change and become sort of. This is going to sound strange. You have to change yourself around and find a way to fit within that department. And I'm getting old. I find myself as I get older less and less adaptable in terms of I'm not really willing to change my entire research emphasis and my entire work and go back to ground zero in my research standing to focus on a completely different area than that which I've been working on. I'm allowed to. I'm happy enough to focus into different areas of what I've been working on and to emphasize different areas to fit within the research requirements of a department and its fit. But going back to completely square zero, no. I'm too far along. I've put in too much work. I've built up a name for myself both in academia and now online and in various other things on that stuff. So yeah. Kind of about the same end of history thinking, which resulted in 122 or so of the F-22s. That's right. Isn't the plan to replace the S3 Viking, C2 Greyhound, and E2 Hawkeye with one F-M basically saying are in hand with Gannet in the 1950s and 60s? I'd say it's the exact same thing which led to the Swordfish in the 1930s, but lead at the one side. Proper is, I both understand and don't understand university's feelings about YouTube. I don't either. And I do. It's interesting. Genome, borrowing the line from William Mulholland, I'd rather give birth to a porcupine backwards than be an academic. I would have had the time for 15 years in the archives. Only 15 years? They're obviously get a group of shit nuts together. They pitch in $100. You have 1,000 of them. You have funds of research ship. You visit an archive, book is made that ship nuts are interested in and snatch up. Yeah, it's not exactly a complicated research funding model, but it works. Many second. It just occurred to me. Perhaps they think you're lying as they suck to the level that no one is interested in supporting them in their work. I would never say that. They're very good at getting funding from research councils. I've seen that from their funding discussions. And I'm not so good at getting funding from research councils. I put in the funding applications and I get some monies, but I don't get a lot from the big research councils because most of them seem to focus on names of your primary working institutions, and I'm not that. And yeah, and they they go through waves of having in vogue topics, and I am terrible at trying to make my work look like it's an in vogue topic. I just go, I'm a naval historian and I'm researching this project. Will you please fund me? Thank you. Could the Blackburn B-138 be airframe being used for carrier-based aircraft? It would have been interesting. Richards, you don't lie. I've watched you for hours. I haven't got one. BS knows BS. Trust me, it's a language unto itself. Yeah, the thing is, and this is the point I've made to a few people in the past, I don't really have the ability to lie. I can sort of lie by omission, but I have to be very careful because of my form of dyslexia. I forget lies. I am very easy to catch out if I try and lie. This is my problem. I am disturbingly easy to catch out. So there isn't much hope for me in lying. This is why I tell people that I don't. It's a case of you can catch me out incredibly easy. It's embarrassingly so when you reach my age. I can be caught out by children. Why I'd never be a good politician. Okay, Tim, do you think Europe will react to your arms to the invasion of Ukraine, or do you think it's just a talk from different countries? Ask me in 5 and 10 years. As Kalmagosov puts, there is the will, but will there be the energy? And will there be the actual commitment? Poland, yes, but Poland's been arming for a while. No, you mean you don't consider YouTube to be a funding council? No, you're far too nice to be a funding council, and you don't ask me weird questions. At no point have you asked me to divulge whether my great grandparents had university degrees, and I honestly wasn't quite sure because one of them had an interesting life, and I wasn't sure whether they would qualify as having a university degree or not. No, Colin, I doubt they have. It is not a number file in his other channels, based on publicising and funding for a couple of departments at Oxford and Cambridge. Probably, but the trouble is there is an interesting divergence between. This is one of the things that differences about me. Of course, I do war studies at King's College London. That's where I did my PhD, so I wander up there quite a bit and chat with them. But I also work in a lot of engineering departments teaching in history of engineering and academic skills to engineering students. That's part of my day job. So I would say there is a difference between the departments which it's going to sound strange. There are some departments which are very it doesn't even not even topics. There's a difference between some departments which are very traditional in their funding locus and attention. There are some departments which are very much going, we want the money, we don't care how we get it. Not quite sure about Go 229. Again, watch the space, we'll see what happens. Again, in Builder Trumps, I have discussed that. Swedish submarines will be a very interesting thing for Poland and various other nations to look at. Ugh, I wish I had good advice. Sadly, bluffing is essential academic skill. I guess just bring the paperwork. That's good. According to Garrick, never telling the same lie twice is a good thing. It is, according to Garrick. Strange enough, I actually do play poker, and I do quite well in poker because I'm good at reading other people. But I don't tend to bluff. I just don't talk about my hand at all. As long as I'm not talking, it's fine. I can keep my face blank. One of the funding councils do ask you about your great grandparents' details. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. I am gonna. It's now 10 o'clock. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna say in about 5 minutes I'm gonna go. So once it's reached the 3 hour mark, I'm going to go toddling off to sort out the family and check they're all okay. Some get very interesting. Am I right that the USA was never going to apologize to USSR for the U-2 spy flights after one was shot down because it would be too humiliating and because the US president... No, they'd never like to apologize for these things. Dana Pollux, you sure we don't ask you weird questions compared to some of the things I've been asking in reviews? No. Take care, Jack Ray. Takianuk. Favorite weird ship? Weird ship. Probably the Glomar Explorer. Take care, John Shea. Take care, Nuck. Jack Ray, thank you. Thank you, Dope Squad. Thank you, Staris Radsky. Thank you, DG40. Thank you, Stafford. Thank you, Abzaski, Michael Cooch. Thank you. Reading all our questions cause you problems with dyslexia. Is there anything we can do, phrasing it out, to make your life easier? No, that's okay. I'm usually okay at reading and talking out loud. My dyslexia shows up most in terms of trying to remember people's names and in my handwriting where it affects my dysgraphia. My handwriting is terrible, which is why I do everything on a computer. Thank you, Colin Cameron. Thank you. Thank you, Grace Husky. Thank you, Amber Polemus. Thank you, JMF. Thank you, Carl Gillisberg. Thank you, Tanif Aleka. Thank you, Dope Squad. Thank you very much, everyone. And let's see. Well, thank you. The cast so the leader of the USSR, friend to nuke Pakistan. Yeah. No, no one would. Yeah, they do, but the people friend to nuke other people. It's actually doing it is a different matter, but some people do take brinkmanship right to the edge. So, what do funding councils ask that manages to outrank a modern navy being transported back to the Battle of Trafalgar? Usually, they start asking very interesting, familial, personal questions, which I just won't answer because I don't think you should ask that, and I don't think that really has any bearing. Take care, Bob Fry. Thank you. Constantius, thank you. And Carl Gosberg, as I see in Dick Richards. Thank you. Thank you, both guys. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care, and thank you for watching.